went on that way only for us to legislate most of our colleagues out. So my request is not only specific to this, is to request the presiding officers, please, once a bill is at this stage, please take as many views and perspectives from members, because this is the most critical stage of lawmaking. Thank you, sir.
I don't believe, sir, that even those who are extremely gifted in law, with this volume of document can be submitted to us a minute before and ask us to debate it, and we start debating and passing. I think that every law merits to be distributed at least 1 week before we pass it. The reason we are supposed to have legislative assistant is to enable us to study, because some of us are not lawyers. But even if we're lawyers, I have seen courts giving lawyers several days to file a response to a petition, or by a respondent or a defense, whatever. But honestly speaking, lawmaking shouldn't be seen like a motion. I support Senator Dixon. The only amendment I'm making is that it's not even for us to debate clause by clause. I am not a lawyer, and I'm affected by law. I am a depositor. I could be affected by the collapse or otherwise of a bank, and this law will come into play. So my plea is that not just on this issue, we should not consider any law at the final stage without having the benefit of distributing it at least 1 week before. Those who choose to read can read. Those who refuse to read, they cannot be blamed. But to ask me now to comment on this, the eloquence of the presenter is enough for us to say, carry go. But I know that in law, it is written like in insurance business, it is in small, small letters. That is where the devil resides. Let it not be said that we pass another law that create the kind of problem that Senator Dixon referred to, where you and I were no longer members of a convention. We were just there as observers, when we were allowed at all. And I believe, I'm told by those who were present, that this is how the law was rushed. Good faith is one thing, but be thorough has no alternative. So I support Senator Dixon's position, sir.
Like the INEC amendment bill. Senator Dixon, I just want to draw your attention. Maybe you forgot. There was no bill that was so debated, clause by clause, one after the other, thoroughly, considered. But the issue was that there were a lot of moves to make sure that the legislators were not sidelined in the electoral act. And so there was back and forth on the whole thing. And we allowed some of our police to take charge to do all these things for us. But then everybody was concerned about what was happening at home. Private elections were being there was preparation for private elections. So people were less interested in what was going on here, because the pressure of preparation for private elections were on at that time. So human beings cannot be perfect. And so that problem came in, but it was the most considered, most deliberated upon in the bill of that session, because everybody was concerned about it, but it was a natural behavior, human mistake. And besides that, normally after the gazetting of every bill, everybody is given a bill to go and look at things. You will now, at that stage, you will get your consultant involved to check everything, and you get everything documented. And once we come to this stage, you have all the observations put in place. Whatever the committee did does not matter, because you have all your own records, your own perspective on something. Once those one is mentioned, say, you raise up your hand and then bring all your observations. But now to say we have to go at the state speed, 1 hour for every clause, I don't think it's something that can be, it's not in that practice. But if you so wish that we should step it down to allow you to study more, it is the vision you say, then we can do that. So that's
Let's take that.
Is it your view that you continue?
Yes.
Clause 22.
Clause 23, my colleagues, there is need, in view of the sensitivity, and this clause deals with what should happen upon revocation of the license of a financial institution. And these are the core of this body we are creating. And it says that any other financial institution may, by notice published in the Federal Government Gazette, appoint the corporation as the liquidator of such failed bank. I think we should limit the time within which this should be done. Within a week upon the revocation of the license of a financial institution, they shall appoint. I felt we should not leave it loose to the discretion as to time, unless the chairman has better information. Yes. Page 23. Page 23, which is dealing with what should happen upon revocation of the license. I'm saying that there's vacuum as to the time frame within which that appointment should happen. And since we are amending to strengthen it, to tighten it, we should say within 1 week or within so number of days. I propose 1 week, but the chairman may have better information.
Distinct colleague is saying. It says, yes, it said deleted, yes. So it is all, an insured institution shall give at least 7 days notice to the corporation and the Central Bank of Nigeria, right? I think it's really captured here. And yes, and we have, so I think we have retained what the Principal Act provides for.
Within which those steps, however formal, should take place.
Dixon is also a member of this committee, and I thought we went through all of this together, even at the public hearing session. So it's well stated on page 24. What is it? He's a member of the committee. Yes, he's a member of the committee.
It's not mandatory. Following that also, as the chairman of the committee clearly stated, a provision for time limitation is provided for in subsection 3. Yeah. Thank you.
Try to get a reasonable sense of the intervention of the committee by deleting the issue of access to the NDIC as a body. I thought you should not grant discretionary powers on the examination by a report that emanated from the banks to only the CBN. Look at what I'm reading. If you look at section 26, the corporation may be granted access to reports of examination conducted by the central bank. What does that mean? If there are reports from banks through the NDIC to the CBN, and the CBN and the NDIC now request for the examination undertaken by CBN, here, this provision is deleted. I thought, like the headings actually prescribe, giving the NDIC some powers. All through the Act, I have seen that a lot of these NDIC powers have actually been taken away. However, why would the CBN be the only regulator that cannot share this information with NDIC that are supposed to be partners? Why should the CBN become so powerful that its report can now be kept just alone and the NDIC does not actually see it? Look at correcting the numbering. The Central Bank of Nigeria should have the discretion on the report of the examination that it may share with the corporation. That discretion is no good
for balance, is not good for equity. The CBN should share this information with NDIC. And if not, why not? That's what I asked the committee, why not? Why wouldn't they share it?
The fact remains that, you see, the examination role is jointly done by both the CBN and, of course, the NDIC. And I think that that is sufficient. There are other roles of the CBN that NDIC ordinarily will not participate in, i.e. supervision of the banks. But the examination, it is usually jointly done by both bodies. And I think that for the sake of regulation, that is sufficient. And so, because the role that the NDIC plays is more like beyond the yearly examination, you know, they play more of an after-fact role when, of course, there has been final liquidation of the challenge. But even before then, they also both participate jointly. So you still have to give the CBN their preserve in terms of their role as the regulator of the entire system. And don't forget, the CBN also is a major shareholder of NDIC. They own 60% of NDIC in terms of the ownership. You understand? So again, you also must give them the independence that you have given to them as the overall regulatory body. So I think that maintaining the principal act as stated here is sufficient, because NDIC has, you know, they have the examination role, which is jointly done on a yearly basis, and it's very practical. So there is no information that they need, that they won't get during the course of their examination. And that is the essence of this. So you have to preserve the independence and of the CBN. Thank you.
Because they are highly technical. You are able to have spend your time with your consultant, if you have interest, to make sure that you look at the entire thing. If you just want to say, any amendment and no amendment, that will be a problem. So that's why we try to hear from the chairman. Luckily, he's an accomplished banker, financial expert. That's why we always ask him to have his view, and then we try to look at the entire thing, examine that any observation before we go into taking a vote at all, if the need to make a vote at all. So, is it on the same issue?
Thank you, Mr. President. Without challenging the chairman of banking, who presented this report, because he's a core professional banker. He has all the experience. But it matters that affect the proposed amendments. First of all, the CBN, from what he has rightly informed us, owns 60% investment in NDIC. But the law envisages that there is need for insurance of depositor funds in the banks that CBN will, through its examinations and regulatory powers, revoke their licenses, that they can no longer operate. And when that happens, you activate the claims of the depositors against the NDIC. It is the NDIC that pays depositors who have lost their funds in the foreclosed banks by the action of the CBN. So I think that it is very important that NDIC, who settles depositors who have lost their funds in the foreclosed banks, should have unhindered access to the books of the banks that have been foreclosed. The CBN should not have the discretionary power to make revelations or documents available to the man who pays the depositors, how they arrived at their decision. I was struggling with the act to see any provision where a review of the powers as to what somebody who has lost his money in foreclosed banks
what the person will be entitled to, the type of compensation the person will be entitled to. Because what we know is that once a bank closes its doors on the announcement by the CBN, no matter what you have standing on your balance in the books of the bank, you're entitled to only 50,000 naira. Has it been amended? Eh? How much? 5 billion? 5 million? It is still nothing. Mr. President, this thing is very critical. Some people have lost 200 million, 700 million in the banks. I'm coming. He will respond. Let him hear me well. Because we are representing the public, people who invest and do business in these banks. The Unity Bank lost its license recently, and I know a customer whose money, 700 million naira, was trapped in the bank. Will 5 million naira be an adequate compensation to him? Because when we hear about these laws, we should begin to think about how to make adequate provision for protection of people who have lost their funds in the banks, which the CBN did not give any notice that they will soon take away the license. And they'll be going to bank, going away every day. Suddenly in the morning, they hear at the bank, license has been revoked, and the NDIC will now come to pay 5 million. So there must be a provision in this act, in this amendment, to make it have a human face, so that when people lose their monies, they will be entitled to reasonable compensation. That's what I'm saying. Because if we continue this way, anyway the CBN waves the hammer. If you have 1 billion, their 1 billion is gone. You go and apply for 5 million naira. Thank you. I speak on behalf of the masses.
Let me first clarify that already we have in all the extant laws guiding both CBN and NDIC adequate provisions to protect depositors' funds. Now, on a yearly basis, all the banks, they pay to CBN, to NDIC, an insurance premium to continuously cover all of the insurance of deposits that you have in the system. Now, equally, they also, because you probably cannot codify all the laws into one document, they also issue circulars on an ongoing basis to also address all of the challenges they see as they go along. So as an example, up until April this year, the deposit insurance cover for any depositor hitherto used to be 200,000 and has since been increased to 5 million minimum. Now, that is responding to changing circumstances and all of that. Now, just this weekend, we had a retreat with NDIC. And for those of our members that were present, they can attest to the fact that even at this 5 million, the part of the models, the explanations and the presentations that were made to us also will suggest that at 5 million today, it covers per bank almost 90% of depositors. Almost 90%. There is no, you cannot possibly see all of the risk that can be attributable to business, but to the extent that it reasonably covers 90%. You can check, the part of the examples that was given, in the just liquidated Heritage Bank, at 5 billion, almost 99% or 98% of the depositors were covered. So the question might be, what happens to the rest? Of course, the typical thing that will happen is that the rest will also still be taken care of upon the realization and the sale of the assets of that bank. So to that extent, all of your worries, I think, are properly taken care of. These are technical issues. We cannot just rise on the spot and say you want to kind of change it overnight. They are very technical. So I so submit, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. President, I don't want us to drag these discussions too far, but we are just coming back from a retreat with the NDIC in Lagos.
And we were even convinced, during that week, that the 5 million, because of the inflation, is so low. But it's not good for us to legislate an amount in the law. But it's an administrative and an issue that can be reviewed over time. So we advise NDIC to consider, given the nature of inflationary pressures in the economy, to raise this figure to a higher figure. But one thing that is very important to consider is that because of the nature of the banking system, this 5 million now covers about 90 to 97% of all depositors. So those who are not covered are those who have huge deposits. And those huge deposits can be redeemable after the sale of the assets, of that bank, by the NDIC, and then they will be paid on a pro rata basis. No, but that's the practice. That is the practice. That is the tradition.
Is the explanatory memorandum. Those in favor that that stand on please say aye. Aye. The ayes are it. The leader of the Senate, can we move so that we report progress? Move to the committee of the year.
A bill for an act to amend the Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation Act number 63 of 2023 to make the corporation more effective, ensure its independence and autonomy in line with Section 1, Subsection 3 of the Principal Act, to bring it in line with current realities and best practices, and for other related matters 2024 third reading taken and passed. Let me commend the chairman of the committee, Senator Adetukumba Abiru, and members of the committee for a job well done. The world is dynamic, so also all sectors, all affairs in the world. The banking industry is not an exception. It is therefore necessary that at all times we try to amend our laws to reflect the current realities, and this is what has just been done here. This is good, and this is good for our economy, particularly at this period that we want the president is really on his toes to make sure that he's changing the fortunes of our economic well-being in this country. It is therefore necessary that also we need to fine-tune our laws to go with the zeal of Mr. President to bring prosperity to this country. Chairman, more grease to your elbows, and we thank you for what you've done. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, Nigerian Forest Security Service Bill 2024 HB 90 was read for the first time in this hallowed chamber on Tuesday, 30th April 2024. This bill seeks to establish the Nigeria Hunters and Forest Security Service for the prevention and combating of crimes in the Nigerian forests and other related activities of the service within the Nigerian forests. Nigerian Port Economic Regulatory Agency Bill 2024 HB 1038 was read for the first time in this chamber on Thursday, 18th July 2024. This bill seeks to repeal the Nigeria Shippers Council Act, Cap N133, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, and enact the Nigerian Port Economic Regulatory Agency Act to provide for economic regulation of port services. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the objectives of these bills are: 1, to establish the Nigerian Port Economic Regulatory Agency as an economic regulatory authority, hereinafter referred to in this bill as the agency, for port services, hereinafter referred to in this bill as regulated services, and to set out the objectives, scope, functions and powers of the agency. 2, to establish a regulatory framework for the effective and efficient economic regulation of regulated services and related activities, for the control of tariffs, rates, and charges to guard against arbitrariness. 3, to monitor compliance of regulated service providers and users in the regulated sector with the provisions of this bill and advise the government through the minister on matters related thereto. And finally, to promote the automation and digitalization of all cargo reception and handling processes and procedures. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, these are straightforward and non-controversial and have gone through the necessary legislative process in the House of Representatives. I therefore urge you all to support the second reading of these bills as we refer them to the Committee of the Whole for clause-by-clause consideration. I thank you.
On hunters and forest security, to my mind, might sound like a mere duplication of the functions that other security agencies are performing in this country. Mr. President, I'm sure we are not going to be carried away by the excitement of the fact that bandits and hoodlums find habitation in our forests, and therefore go on to pass bills that will go to contradict some of the provisions that we have in our security agencies to protect our land. So, Mr. President, in as much as I agree that bills that have gone through all the furnaces in the House of Representatives can be concurred here in the Senate, I want us to be a little circumspect in considering some of these bills, especially those novel ones that may sound very, very beautiful, but may be counterproductive in our fight against insurgency. And if you look at the Shippers Council bill, repeal and enactment, you will find out that some of the provisions that have been made here are provisions that can ordinarily be part of a reform of the existing bill, that we don't need to create new bills to repeal an existing one just merely because we want to introduce some new items onto the existing act. So, Mr. President, I suggest that we must be very careful in assenting to this concurrence in order that we do not undo what we have already.
So, in other words, I thought I have the two bills before you. Do you have the two bills before you? We ought to have the two bills before us. So, so that we, in case we go into clause-by-clause consideration, then we know exactly what we are amending, what we are not amending, what we are adding, and what we are not adding. So I can see your confusion is that the bills are probably not attached to the debate on concurrence. So, Senator Dingy.
Let me follow in toto the reservations made by the minority leader. First and foremost, these are rules, the Senate rules. Does not make it mandatory that whatever comes to the House, we must or we shall concur. So also the rules of the House of Representatives. The only time that we are allowed to concur is when we are satisfied that what is before us is important, is germane. Usually, conventionally, when the leader of the Senate or the House moves a motion, usually you don't go against it. But this is not a motion. This is a law. And you look at Nigerian Forest Security Services Bill 2024, and the bill seeks to establish the Nigerian Hunters and Forest Security Services for the prevention, combating of crimes in Nigerian forests and other related activities of the service within the Nigerian forest. this is this is unprecedented. This is Nigeria is not a banana country. You look at this. The Senate leader has not provided us germane reasons, even though it's not his bill. So because it's coming from the House of Reps, he has to move. But I have not listened to any logic as to why this bill deserves a second reading. Secondly, the minority leader has sufficiently said, why is the bill? So if there is no bill, why are we building a castle in the air? So I think it is important that, Mr. President, you guide this chamber. Let's first have, we may not discard it altogether, but let's have the bill. Let's go through it and see if there is any merit, regardless of where it is coming. While we're in the House, we also debate some of the bills coming from the Senate, and those that we find are not good enough to our people, to the laws, we drop them and we advise the other chamber as to why we cannot concur. So it is important that we all understand the gamut of lawmaking. Now, it's not everything that comes, we must just stamp it. I think I move that these things are stepped down so that we get the bills, and then on another day, we'll bring it forward for debate on second reading.
Yes.
Having a House of Rep and Senate is that if any impurity slip through one chamber, the other chamber can correct it. It is not an act of hostility or an act of cooperation. We just must ensure that before any bill or any proposed bill is passed, that it benefits from the wisdom of both the House and the Senate. And if it doesn't, for me, there will be nothing wrong in ensuring that the bill is not passed by the Senate. It is more so, sir, when we are creating a new law, and it bears repeating that we can't be expected as responsible senators to be debating a piece of legislation, a proposal, to establish something completely new that has to do with security. I keep saying that when it has to do with security, not because I don't think we should guide jealously the independence of the legislative arm, but because I think that security issues are so complex that we need, in my view, to have the input from our security agencies. I still believe so because by the time we resort to use of hunters in law, use of hunters, and in my place, hunters are of different categories. What we appear to have been created to make the forest safe may also become a legal foundation for those who have weapons, not necessarily trained officially. The hunters train hunters, and they are allowed to bear weapons in the forest, and God help us that they use it for the good of the nation. I think things like this require rigorous review and some consultation with the security agency, at least the Office of the National Security Advisor. And so submit, Mr. President.
So you second the motion?
Hereby move to support the position of
yes.
Distinguished Senator Ningi that we step down this bill for another day.
Yes.
To enable us look at it comprehensively.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, the motion has been moved by Distinguished Senator Ningi and seconded by Distinguished Senator Adams Oshumole that the two bills be stepped down for full details to be provided for us to go through clause by clause consideration, look at the merits and demerits of the bills before approving same for second reading and further legislative action. Those in support of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The two bills are hereby stepped down. Let me thank members for their contributions and further reiterate the fact that whenever a bill comes for concurrence before us, it is not that we must take it in toto. It is expected that we'll do our work also by looking at the clause by clause, taking our time to see whether the merits and demerits before we arrive at whether it should go forward or not. And that is what the House also does when we send things to them. The Senate leader is obligated to at least lead the debate and produce the bills for concurrence. And thereafter, distinguished senators are expected to do their work diligently to ensure that what we pass will stand the test of time and then will serve posterity and the nation effectively. Senate Leader, in the absence of any other thing on our agenda, on our other paper, I must thank distinguished senators and thank the Deputy Senate President for the speedy manner in which you have conducted today's event, and to say that myself and the Honorable Speaker, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, were invited to the launching of the 2025 emblem, Armed Forces emblem, to honor our fallen heroes. And during the occasion, we took time also to participate and to make pledges on your behalf, because I know that you feel for the families of those left behind by those who have sacrificed their lives in the service of fatherland. So thank you, DSP, for conducting today's event successfully. Senate Leader, go ahead.
Well, Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, huh?